If you do any prospecting with LinkedIn, you have got to go get set up with Surf. That's SURFE. It's a tool you can use to add new contacts to your CRM system directly from LinkedIn in seconds. I'm using it every single day. I add contacts, follow my deals, keep track of notes, and it ends up saving me a bunch of time on prospecting and outreach, which means I can spend more time moving my deals along. The data is always 100% accurate since I don't have to copy and paste all the fields over from each and every contact that I want to put in my CRM. Instead, Surf does that all automatically with just one click in about 60 seconds. The team over at Surf has put together a very special offer for fans of sales players. There's a link down in the show notes, and you can use the promo code JWSurf5. Don't forget the E at the end of Surf. That's JWSurf5 for 5% off your first year. Don't spend another minute doing things manually. Go get set up with Surf. Some of the career milestones that I experienced that helped me to know that I was on the right track in my SaaS career. And I know many of you out there listening are either trying to break into SaaS sales or most recently joined a company in your first SaaS selling role or maybe in an SDR role. And I know that there's, lots of people that talk about the industry out there, but maybe not so many that open up on the, highs and lows and the struggles and things like that can come with having a career in SaaS sales. So besides talking about the good milestones, I want to try to talk about some of the failures as well, so you realize what you're, getting yourself into. Now, I'll say that this has been, and I always say that this is a very rewarding career path. There's a lot of upside, both financially and personally. I find the work enjoyable and fun, and I get a lot of fulfillment out of helping my customers find technical solutions to problems. And I just enjoy the game myself. I like working with, enterprise companies, and I like to sort of run my sales framework and playbook to get big deals done and to, once again, solve problems across a massive enterprise in my case. And it didn't start out that way. I always try to emphasize that I didn't just land in enterprise sales. I didn't start my career selling to, household name brands. I started first selling to very small companies. In fact, before I even got into software, I actually sold media for a while. And my vertical in my media sales role was the legal vertical. And I think I switched to healthcare after a while. But I was selling to lawyers and dentists and doctors for some time before I jumped into SaaS. And then my first SaaS role, I was only selling to really small, I think they call them SOHO, like small office, home office type companies, SOHO. And that was, business owners who had an e-commerce company. A lot of times it was people that were side hustling and needed an e-commerce shopping cart to sell their products. So that was my first SaaS role. But let's take it back. I want to call out a couple of the milestones that, when these things happen in retrospect, I realize, and at the time I realized, but also in retrospect, I realized that these were things that were pushing me in the right direction in my SaaS career. And it's how I knew that I must be onto something and was on the right track. So I'll take it back to sort of the early years of my career. And, I've talked about this a bunch on the show, but just to rehash the story, the biggest thing that I did early on in my career that I think still has set me up for the financial success that I've had and the results that I've had and the type of career that I've had was I got myself into the sort of network of SaaS sellers. And how I did that was I left my hometown of Phoenix, Arizona after school, after I finished college, and I moved to Austin, Texas. Now, I realize a lot of you out there listening are not able to go and make a big drastic change or move to, a more tech-centered city. And I've talked about a lot on the show that I'm excited to see that the industry is moving out of some of these tech epicenters. So there's still quite a presence in places like San Francisco and Seattle and Austin and Boston and so forth. But I'm glad to see that there's a lot of secondary cities that are getting some tech logos and brands and a lot of tech opportunity. So I'm a big fan of that. I think that, remote is the way to go for a lot of roles. But a while back, I had Christine Rogers, who's the COO of Aspireship. And a lot of you guys know who Aspireship is because they have, training for sort of retooling the workforce towards a more specifically tech sales career path. And she and I got into this discussion about how there's a lot of value in working in person with a team of tech sellers or tech leadership, because you're going to get, and I'll use this a lot today, audibles. You're going to get these audibles from the leaders or from your mentors if you're working in person. Even if you're not in the office every day with that person or those people, it still helps to be sort of in the environment and get yourself in, that network. It's harder to do that today in 2022, especially if you're doing a remote role and you're working from, a city that's not close to where your leadership is or where your real mentors and growth can be found, right? So again, not impossible. And what I like about the distributed industry now is that there's more opportunity in SaaS than ever, because there's folks in cities that are, not San Francisco or Denver or, Austin or whatever, that are able to get their foot in the door in a SaaS company. But I'll talk about this more in detail with one of the sort of milestones that I experienced being in Austin, in, this network of other people that were doing this profession, and, specifically working in tech in Austin was something that I think fast tracked my personal career and opened up my network to even more bigger opportunities. And I think it did definitely help to be in that environment. So, I took a risk in 2013 and I moved to Austin, left my hometown. I had never been to Austin before, by the way. I had never even visited for a vacation or anything like that. I moved completely sight unseen. I leased an apartment online. I had never seen the place until I showed up in Austin with all of my stuff in a U-Haul. It's a crazy story. It gets even crazier than that, because when I got there, I had sort of miscalculated what it was going to cost me to rent in Austin. It was quite, a significant increase in my monthly rent going from where I was living in the Phoenix area to Austin. And I ended up the first couple months there overdrawing my account. Yes, I overdrew my account because I did not have enough money to cover the rent at that time. And I'll get more into what I did about that and how that all worked out for me in just a second. But it was a huge sort of push for me. And I always like the analogy of burning your ships. And if you haven't heard about burning your ships or burning your fleet, I don't remember where the story comes from, but the idea is that if you are going into battle or something like that, or you're going to go face a big challenge, burn the ships behind you so you can't go back. There's just no going back. And that's more or less how I structured things for my move to Austin. I was not in a position, I either had to succeed or die trying, not literally die, but like face great failure and have to call my parents and borrow money or whatever I would have to do. And again, I realize out there that a lot of you may not be in a position where you can go and take a massive risk like this. But I will say that the risk definitely paid off. I, landed in my first software role in office in Austin. This is circa 2013. And even better than that, I ended up on the team of a manager who was incredibly influential and still is in my career. And for whatever reason, this person just, he took me under his wing and taught me everything he knew about sales. I was so new to selling. I hadn't had a lot of success in the media side. Frankly, I hadn't seen huge numbers or results. So the fact that I was even trying to get in the door in SaaS sales was just, blowing me. It was really a mind fuck, frankly, to think about trying to succeed in SaaS sales when I hadn't had a huge track record. I'd closed some sales, but I didn't have, this track record or profile of high success yet. And this manager took me under his wing, taught me what he knew. He had been a bond trader on Wall Street early in his career, so he was just an amazing seller. He had sold, media himself for a number of years, decades really. And again, this is still someone who's a close friend of mine today and someone that I call all the time when I need advice. So I got really lucky, honestly. And knowing, once I started working with that manager, I started closing deals and I was able to actually afford my rent in Austin because the commission checks started rolling in. So yes, it was very, right place, right time, right manager somehow. I don't know why that worked out that way, because had any of those elements of the equation changed, again, I might have had to make a phone call to my parents or at that time my in-laws and said I need to borrow some money so I can move back home. And yeah, that wouldn't have been fun. So somehow it all worked out. The commission checks started rolling in and I started building some results or a track record of results that I could then parlay into, selling to bigger companies and selling bigger deal sizes in tech. And so, again, I think the lesson here is be on the lookout for those leaders that are taking time to invest in you. If you have a leader that's investing in you and they're good, and they're helping you hit your financial goals and achieve the results that you want to achieve in your career, you know you're on the right track if that's happening. And I maybe didn't realize it fully at the time, but in retrospect I realized huge experience or huge opportunity to work for this individual, and that was definitely a major milestone in my career. And I now know that helped propel me in the direction that I've gone from then on. So let's fast forward to 2015, and I ultimately left that first software job and that manager to grow into selling to bigger selling to bigger brands and closing bigger deals. But I wasn't happy with the company that I went to, and I actually took a call from a recruiter at my desk. This is crazy. This one of the most tenacious recruiters that I've ever worked with, and also still a very close friend of mine and professional connection. She called me. She cold called me at my desk. I pick up my phone. My manager sits, a couple seats away, and she says, "Hey, Jesse, this is so and so," and I'm not going to say her name here on the air, but she says, "I've got an opportunity that I think you're gonna be really interested in. And this is to come in to a very small sales team at a B series funded startup. They've got, I think, around 50 employees at the time. It might've even been less than that. It was sub 50 employees, most likely. And they sell to the enterprise, and they sell a technology that's designed for enterprise e-commerce and retail brands. And, your profile on LinkedIn came to my attention, and you're in Austin, they're in Austin, or at least some of the execs were in Austin, and your profile's of interest to the hiring manager for this role. Let's talk." And this, at the time, a lot of people were like, "Why would you go leave?" Because I was actually at a really hot company in Austin that had a lot of fanfare around it, and there was a lot of hype about it. And I didn't see it once I got in the door there, and didn't think that it lived up to the hype that they sort of put forth out there. So I was looking for something else. And a lot of people were like, "What are you doing, considering this opportunity?" It was not a pay cut. It was a small pay raise, but the title was sort of a cut. It was going back to like being an inside sales specialist or rep or whatever the title was at the time. It wasn't very glamorous. And sure, the company had raised some money recently, but I didn't understand anything about the sort of enterprise retail category. I didn't know anything about MarTech. This is a MarTech company. But when the recruiter that had called me at my desk, we kept talking, and she was like, "Look, this is a chance for you to work really closely with some of the greatest leaders in the technology business." And she wasn't wrong. The leader of sales at that company had been part of an amazing success story. Again, I'm not going to say any names or logos during this episode, but just know that the VP of sales at the company had worked for essentially the first e-commerce enterprise cart that had been sold off to another really big software company. So he had helped grow a company to, I don't know what it was, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, maybe more. And then the CEO of this startup had been, a chief revenue officer at a very well-known publicly traded SaaS company. And he had grown that company from essentially zero in revenue to, I think hundreds of millions is what it was before they went public and exited and things like that. And so knowing that I was going to be working with these two leaders was really sort of one of the big compelling events. That it was a small raise. Like I said, it wasn't, the money that drew me to this. It was like the opportunity to go and work with these leaders who had experienced this amazing success, and knowing that I was going to be working with them in the office in Austin and sitting next to them, and I'd be able to ask them questions about their exits from these various companies and how they built their playbooks and things like that. So that bet turned out to pay off really well. That is probably one of the best decisions I've made in my career to date, was to take that role. And by the way, long story that I won't dive into. I almost didn't get the role after I, started entertaining conversations with the recruiters. They almost hired someone else instead of me. That person bowed out, and I got the job. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to go into that company. I moved pretty quickly through that organization and assumed a leadership role at a certain point there, after putting up some numbers and, showing my results. And I think the best part about it was back to the sort of audibles. there was a lot of Fridays where I was, in the office sitting next to this CEO who, again, had been a former CRO at a SaaS company that was just wildly successful. And I would just we would just sit and chat about business and SaaS and fundraising. He taught me all about fundraising. He had just raised the capital for the B series, and we'd talk about prospecting. We'd talk about negotiating with large enterprises. There was just so much value that I got from working in that role. My direct manager in that role is an amazing individual that I'm hoping to get on the podcast sometime. She was really one of the pioneers in social selling on LinkedIn and Twitter and things like that. So I just learned that I honestly didn't earn a wild amount of money in that role, but I learned the skills that have, again, propelled me or pushed me into some amazing opportunities. And I really look back and say, man, I'm so glad that I took that phone call at my desk. I didn't take the whole call at my desk. I told her to call me back on my cell later that day, but I'm really glad that I pursued that opportunity. And again, I think most people would have probably poo-pooed it a little bit. I hate to say poo-poo on the air. I think a lot of people would have just walked away from it thinking, what is this? This seems kind of janky. There just wasn't a lot. It was a startup. There wasn't, they couldn't answer a lot of questions because it was still so new. The product, the team, the go-to-market was all so new that, I couldn't ask some of the standard questions like how many reps are hitting their number today on the team, that they didn't know. It just wasn't, built out enough. This is a very, very risky move. And my lesson in terms of the milestone itself is, take a few risks. I think it's okay to take a few risks, make them calculated as best as possible. At this time, I was fortunate that both my wife and I were working. So I felt like even if this startup didn't work out, we would have an income and I'd be able to find something else or go back to doing what I was doing before. But it was worth the move. And, ultimately the salary did get to where I needed it to be, or the compensation, I should say, because it's never just salary in sales. But the comp finally got to the level, again, because I started building this skill set of working with executives at retail brands. And that is what is also still a very desirable part of my CV, is that I've had this experience working with brands like, and I won't name the brands that I worked with there, but you get the idea. They were household name retail brands. In a lot of cases in this company, I got to meet with these executives in person because this was 2015 through 2017. And at that time, there was no pandemic. There was no hesitation to fly reps out to go on site to meetings. And so at this company, I did some really, really amazing on-site meetings with some of the world's largest companies where I got to meet their executives in person. I also went to a lot of trade shows. If you ever get an opportunity to go to a trade show, just take it up. You will not regret it. A lot of times people ask me how I've grown my LinkedIn to, just have so many connections. And I tell them, well, I used to go to shows like once a quarter or more. In the early part of the year is probably a couple a month even. And, going to these shows, you actually get to meet these retail prospects or these enterprise prospects and buyers in person and shake hands, and you can connect with them on LinkedIn, and then they remember who you are because you met them in person. You might have had a beer with them or shared a drink or something. So that was hugely valuable. And I know, again, another lesson is if you get a chance to go in person, especially now as things are starting to open back up, take any opportunity you can get to go on site, whether that's with your leadership team, your internal team, or with your customers, because that opportunity really built my Rolodex in a way that has continued to, essentially pay me dividends in my SaaS enterprise selling career. So that was that. Let's move ahead to the next milestone just in the interest of time here. So after doing that for a few years, a connection helped me find my way into a Bay Area unicorn company. This was a very well-funded, fast-growing, very hot company. They've, since exited. They at the time they were pre-IPO. They've since IPO'd, and I believe they were actually recently acquired by private equity. And this was a great opportunity for me for a couple reasons. One, it allowed me to see what SaaS sales process, frameworks, success, and results looks like at scale. Up to this point, I'd mostly been at pretty small startup companies, small being, sub 500 employees. this was a, I think 1,500 employee company when I joined, and it was really helpful to work with a full operations team, a sales ops team, enablement. There was a lot of tools. I learned a lot about the technologies in, the sales stack world. And I, saw people have success at large scale and what a scaled company looks like. So this is really good. And then it just opened up my network. This is again, a Bay Area company with sales team members that were all over the United States and frankly all over the world. So I grew my network in the industry pretty much exponentially. And I still talk to a lot of the people that I met in that role. And I see that a lot of them have gone on to lead SaaS companies as, executive sales leaders or marketing leaders. And that's been really valuable to have those individuals in my network. So the lesson here in this milestone is if you have an opportunity to get in at one of these big, fast growing SaaS companies, it's worth going, as long as it's a product you're passionate about and the culture is aligned with what you want to see in your sort of day-to-day work life balance. As long as those things are in place, it's probably worth spending some time. It's definitely worth spending some time at a unicorn, fast growing, hot SaaS logo if you can get in the door, because you're going to grow your network and you're going to see that network goes on to do a lot of different things in the industry. And those people will continue to reach out to you and check in if you sort of cultivate that. And that's something that I am in a good habit of doing, which is, cultivating my relationships and keeping in touch with people that I worked with. And, from time to time, I've had to reach out to, not had to, but I've reached out to people to, ask about positions on their team or, find opportunities to continue collaborating. I've even, had that network sold to that network or had that network sell to me. So it's kind of interesting that you grow this whole network of SaaS professionals if you can go to one of those big companies. So that was awesome. I learned a lot about executive presence, presentation, and sort of internal, what they call managing up, which is, when you work in a larger organization, you need to learn how to navigate, frankly, some of the politics and to be able to manage up and present internally and sell internally. Those are really important skills in SaaS sales. You wouldn't think so, but they really are, because sales is very much a team. Enterprise SaaS sales is very much a team sport, and it takes a village selling to another village. That's really what it comes down to. And your ability to align your internal resources and navigate your internal organization to get stuff done is actually one of the main drivers of success in large enterprise deals. So learning that skill, being at a big company, this was a huge milestone that, now that I look at it, that's at the time too, I knew I must be onto something good here, because I'm in this, very well-known company and it's growing, things are moving. I'm growing myself personally. I'm learning executive presence. I'm learning how to manage my internal, teams and processes. So that was yet another milestone. So after that company, I went out and actually one of the cool things that I did was I started just networking in Austin. And at the time, I don't think I didn't know what I was really hoping to get out of this. I just would go to lots of networking events in Austin, mostly because I enjoyed meeting other tech sellers. I enjoyed meeting entrepreneurs and founders. And I ended up doing some, frankly, advisory work, I guess is what you'd probably call it, where I came into some early startups and helped them get their sales efforts off the ground. And in one case, I worked for the startup as an actual employee. I was employee number 6 or 7 at the company, and helped them sell their first round of logos for their product. Now that company has since been sold off to a much bigger company. So they exited. The founders are, still working at that company, the acquirer. And what I learned from this experience, and by the way, a lot of these I just met, I just found through networking, again, going out to events. In one case, I met the founder of one of these startups while I was on a bike ride. This is a true story. I was riding my bike through Austin, and this founder of this tech company was riding, right behind me. We ended up, striking up a conversation on the trail. And the next thing you know, I'm working for him a few weeks later. So kind of crazy. But if you can put yourself out there in whatever way you can, this takes a little bit of time. And I think what a lot of people saw in me at that point was I had been at a few early startups. I had seen some processes at scale. So the balance that I had at that point in my career was having both experience working in early companies and getting, something from nothing or building traction from nothing. But I also had some practice working with big companies and seeing what scale looks like in a SaaS company. So I had I think tremendously advantageous position at that point where these founders could see that I knew my stuff. And, knowing that stuff just came from being in the environment, practicing, reading a lot, studying, doing the job, trying to do the best I could, learning, soaking it all in. And, that helped me kind of do some of these early stage projects. And that experience working with early startups to get their first round of logos sold, or to build out their prospecting strategy, or, whatever, all the different things that I did for those, was also incredibly valuable, and was I looked at it at the time as just a learning opportunity, and something that I was just, genuinely curious about and passionate about, and something that I wanted to try out. So that's that. And yeah, that's also kind of positioned me to be, I think, a little unique in my career, because I can go into an interview and say, look, I understand both the early startup world as well as the scaled out world. I've done both. I get, what it takes, the momentum it takes to get your first customer, but I also understand what it takes to grow and expand your customers at a, larger, more scaled out company. So last thing I'll talk about, and because I'm running out of time here, but in 2020, I closed my largest deal of my career. This was another major milestone where I think especially when the commission check got deposited in my account, I was like, wow, I really, really sort of made it in this business. And I think I attribute that deal to just all of the learnings over the years, working with customers and selling and negotiating. And in this case, the biggest thing that drove this deal was my ability to navigate this organization. This was a really, big household name company in the services industry. And I worked with the executive leaders all the way down to the people that were on the project level, and, managed relationships across different threads. I was, fortunate to have one of the executives based here in Arizona. So I was able to offer some in-person, even in the middle of a pandemic, was able to, offer an in-person coffee meeting, socially distanced at that time. But I think, having those relationships, being able to present the value of our product and sort of work the process helped me close this massive deal. And now that I've closed that, I have that on my resume, and I can speak to it very, very, specifically in an interview. And closing a massive deal like that is a career changer, because it puts you in a whole nother bracket when it comes to selling. And I even have this customer as a reference for me. So when I interview for roles, I can say, hey, you want to just call this customer and ask them about how I did selling to them? And that's pretty much like the ultimate, proof point on your resume. That's better than an employer reference, is when your customers are willing to talk to your employers or future employers and say, hey, this guy actually knows how to sell. He sold, a massive deal to our company, and, did so by managing resources and working with our leadership team and our project team, and got us what we needed to get this deal done. So that, again, I attribute it to all of the learnings over the years, but that was a huge milestone for me. And when that happened, I realized, like, I'm definitely still onto something very good here. So in summary, I thought I'd also just outline a couple of the skills that I, in tandem with just sales and enterprise selling and SaaS selling skills, that I tried to hone in on, because I think knowing some of these other disciplines helped me to streamline some things. So I'll just read these off here. Copywriting, learning how to write, clearly, concisely, persuasively, has been an amazing skill set as I work with executives. The shorter the emails, the better. The more clear your communication is, the more direct it is, not using filler words. Study copywriting if you can. You can't use all of the copywriting tricks out there in enterprise SaaS, but you can take the some of the parts of that and work them into your communications with your executive buyers. Negotiation has been, critical as I, not only navigate my career, but also navigate deals with customers. Speaking and presenting, part of me doing this podcast was wanting to improve my, enunciation and the way that I present myself and speak. But I've done some other things over the course of my career to improve the way that I present and speak and, manage a room, essentially. Understanding a little bit about economics has helped also. Just knowing what's going on in the macro and microeconomic worlds will help you have some context and, frankly, some empathy into your, customers, especially as you're working with big companies who are impacted by world economics or local economics. So, honing in on that, reading a few books, listening to podcasts, that kind of stuff has helped me. Project management, when you get to a certain level of selling, it really is just project management, because you are trying to work backwards from a date where you need to have a deliverable, and coordinating all the resources and getting all the steps and milestones completed to kick that project off. That's essentially enterprise selling. So learning about how project management works, learning some of the, especially like Scrum and Agile methodology and tech, is really valuable. And I'd highly recommend learning some of those things. Learning about operations, how do financial, resources think about business, what's OPEX, what's CAPEX, learn some of those terminologies, and you'll do yourself a big favor. Read some financial statements. That's always been helpful, because one, you're going to find pain for your customers, but also you're just going to get a general understanding of how big businesses or even small businesses operate.